Let's take a look at 10 great older movies that just seem more relevant today than they ever did when they were released. I've been going through my massive media collection, watching some great old movies I haven't seen in years or even decades, and I've discovered 10 movies that I think are just more relevant today or definitely worth your attention as movies that were just maybe underrated at the time or didn't really connect with audiences, but today they just seem to have more impact than ever. So with no further ado, let's get into it. Number 10. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. This 2005 adaptation of the hugely successful Douglas Adams novel of the same name is weird, quirky, and decidedly British. The sheer absurdity of the plot actually seems, if anything, more relevant today in our current political and social climate. Some interstellar race has determined that Earth must be obliterated to clear the way for a galactic highway that is being built. The last few survivors go on a bizarre quest to learn the meaning of life and everything. This movie got mixed reviews at the time of release, but has since become a cult classic. It is truly one of those movies that you find you enjoy way more than you remembered. Maybe it was ahead of its time, or maybe we are just more ready to relate to strong political undertones in this movie, with all the absurdity in governments and all the crazy stuff going on in our real lives. Number 9. Young Frankenstein. Young Frankenstein is one of those movies you just have to see. Made at the height of comedic director Mel Brooks' career, this movie has become more than just a cult classic. It has endeared itself to generations of fans. Young Frankenstein appears on just about every best of list you will find for comedy movies, and has received the honor of being considered culturally significant enough to be included in the Library of Congress National Film Registry. The movie attempts to pay homage to older horror movies from the 1930s and is shot entirely in black and white, and employs several other nods to the old great campy horror films, while managing to parody them in a hilarious way. Number 8. Galaxy Quest. With the current state of the Star Trek franchise being a hotly contested topic, most fans can agree that the new Trek has lost the optimism, innocence, and hope of the older series. New Trek is a lot darker, there is more interpersonal conflict aboard ship, and the characters are just less squeaky clean. Galaxy Quest is more popular than ever because, although it is a parody, it reminds people of the roots of the original series, the concept that in the future humanity will be better, more evolved than we are today, and we will have found ways to solve our differences without resorting to violence, except in the gravest of situations. Galaxy Quest is obviously a parody of Star Trek, but one done so well it has gained an honored position in the hearts of Star Trek and science fiction fans everywhere. On the surface, Galaxy Quest seems like a silly, contrived exploitation film, but there is so much more than meets the eye in this movie. The writers, and indeed the whole team behind the movie, managed to perfectly capture the spirit of what makes Star Trek great. The hope, the optimism for the future, and the belief that the good guy will win if he is virtuous enough. Sure, it's a comedy, but at its heart it's still a great sci-fi story that makes you want to believe. The movie centers around the actors of a science fiction show who get pulled into a real sci-fi situation, and they have to use the lessons they've learned on set to solve real issues, with fate of the world stakes. If you haven't seen this movie, now is the time. It has only gotten better with age, especially when compared to the overly dark, gritty, and fatalistic nature of TV and movies in the last decade. Number 7. Starship Troopers. Not so much a parody, but more of a satiric take on dystopian future movies, Starship Troopers was not well received at its launch. Critics panned the movie, I think because they didn't understand it. Director Paul Verhoeven of RoboCop fame is known for a rather tongue-in-cheek style that I think was lost on audiences at the time. But between its release in 1997 and today, it has gathered a huge following and is now regularly mentioned as one of the best science fiction movies of the 1990s. Starship Troopers is the story of an interplanetary war between the highly militaristic, fascist government of Earth and a race of non-technological aliens known as the Arachnids. While it's a fun, campy action movie, the real highlights of the film are in its social and political commentary. The director pulls no punches when satirizing the military-industrial complex and governments as a whole. Like most of the movies on this list, it seems, if anything, more relevant in today's culture than ever. Number 6. What Women Want.
She said she had to be in bed early.
Well, I had her in bed by 11.
I can hear what women think.
Some of you may think this movie is an odd addition on this list, but hear me out. With the gender divide in 2020 being deeper than ever, and with things like the Me Too movement in the forefront, it is more important than ever to be compassionate and understanding of the thoughts and feelings of others. One of Mel Gibson's finest performances, alongside the talented Helen Hunt, this apparent rom-com is really more than that. It dips into the sci-fi territory with a huge question. What if a man could hear what women really think? The events leading up to the character's transformation are a little silly, but the writing and acting performances make this movie the perfect break from the tough, angry styles of today's movies. It brings some very important topics and questions to the forefront while keeping things light enough not to offend anybody. It is really a triumph of a social experiment that gets both sexes thinking more about how to relate to the other. And did I mention it's funny? Yeah, it's really funny. Just watch it, you'll be glad you did. Number 5. Zombieland. I actually just watched this movie for the first time a few weeks ago. I'm generally not really into zombie movies, so I dismissed it at the time as just not for me. After watching this movie, I literally hate myself for not seeing it earlier. Another in my theme of parody and satire, Zombieland is smartly hilarious and seemed like a completely fresh experience even though it's over a decade old. Don't write this off as just another zombie movie. It has elements of comedy, romance, and serious social commentary while being presented in an almost comic book-like feel. On the surface, it's the story of the journey of a few survivors of the zombie apocalypse, but in reality it is really smart social satire. It feels completely relevant to today's struggles between pandemics, global warming, and all the other potentially world-ending threats we see in real life. Number 4. Scott Pilgrim vs. the World.
Hey, what's up? I'll leave you alone forever now.
What can I say about this movie? Is it weird? Yep. Strange? Yep. Odd? Even bizarre? You got it. Definitely another cult classic in the making. Scott Pilgrim leaps off the pages of a graphic novel series and comes to life in this weird, quirky love story of a dysfunctional 20-something with completely unexplained mystical video game powers and his love interest who rollerblades into his life literally from his dreams. You can't explain this movie properly even if you've seen it 20 times, but suffice it to say you discover new Easter eggs and raise more questions each time you watch it. Follow Scott as he battles each of Ramona's 7 evil exes and suspend disbelief permanently. You'll have to, trust me. Number 3. 300. 300 was pretty popular when it came out, but it disappeared into obscurity very shortly after. 300 is a beautiful work of art wrapped in an incredible action movie that deserves to be remembered. Based on a hugely successful graphic novel of the same name by iconic comic artist Frank Miller, also known for Batman: The Dark Knight Returns and Sin City, 300 has a pedigree that deserves to be revisited. Thanks to the incredible artistic direction of Zack Snyder in his heyday, this movie achieves a look that has never been seen before and is not even matched by its own sequel, 300 Rise of an Empire. If you haven't seen the sequel, I don't blame you, it wasn't great. Too many movies suffer from bad sequels, and this one should have been left as it was. The epic story of Leonidas of Sparta and his 300 valiant warriors holding back the hordes of Alexander the Great should be remembered fondly by all. This movie was both an artistic and technical achievement that deserves a place amongst the greatest movies of all time. Number 2. The Watchman. Many fans of the original comics were not pleased by the Watchmen film. Personally, I saw the movie before I read the comics, and as such I was blown away at the darker tone and more mature themes present in a superhero film. It was way ahead of its time, and as such it got a bit of a bad rap. Going back and watching this movie now, it fits in well with other things we are used to watching like Game of Thrones or shows like Netflix's The Punisher or Altered Carbon. We are now comfortable with shades of grey in our movies, and we expect our heroes not to be whitewashed little Boy Scouts. But in 2009, we were accustomed to superhero films like Sam Raimi's Spider-Man and the original X-Men trilogy, and had only just begun to be exposed to the darker side of comic stories with 2008's The Dark Knight. Sure, in the 90s we had The Crow, another movie that deserves to be on this list, frankly, and there were a few other darker comic book movies here and there, but I just don't think people were ready for what The Watchmen had to offer. The story takes you into the lives of a handful of washed-up retired superheroes who get pulled into a plot and must come out of retirement to save the day, and each other, from total extinction. There are some very mature themes involving sex, rape, murder. These heroes are not your average good guys. They have layers, they have questionable morals, they have PTSD and homicidal mania. It's a deeply complex story that you'll really have to watch 2 or 3 times to get the most out of. If anything, you will likely be more comfortable with The Watchmen now than you were 10 years ago. And that's the basic theme of this list. Number 1! V for Vendetta.
Who are you?
Who is but the form following the function of what, and what I am is a man in a mask.
Well, I can see that.
Of course you can. I'm not questioning your powers of observation. I'm merely remarking upon the paradox of asking a masked man who he is.
I absolutely love this movie. I watch it every November, as close to the 5th as possible, because the movie centers around Guy Fawkes Day, which is November 5th. V for Vendetta is a criminally underrated movie produced and directed by the Wachowski brothers, the same team that brought you the mega hit The Matrix. However, V for Vendetta never got the attention it deserved. Another excellent example of a comic adaptation done right, V for Vendetta paints a compelling tale where the villain is also the hero, and right and wrong blend and distort in such ways that you're really not sure who to root for until the very end of the movie. It's filled with emotionally moving scenes that leave you on the edge of your seat. It's technically a dystopian science fiction movie, not a superhero film, and its core concepts discuss the worst of fascist governments and the will of the people to maintain the status quo rather than stand up for their own freedoms. It takes one monumental event to cascade the will of the people into fighting for their own freedom and standing up for what is right. Both the graphic novel and the movie are absolute masterpieces and should be enjoyed as such. Sadly, this movie has more or less been relegated to the cult movie genre and is for the most part not widely popular. I'm putting this movie as number 1 on this list because it's the movie that deserves the most attention in our current world. The themes are more relevant today in our current political climate than they ever have been, and this movie stands as a warning against giving government too much control over your rights and freedoms. Alright guys, so that's my list. Please remember, this is not a definitive list, this is not an official list, this is my opinions of 10 great movies that I feel everyone should see at least once, or rewatch if they haven't seen them in a few years, because the context of these movies has subtly changed over the years to be more relevant than they were 10 or 15 or 20 years ago. So, guys, comment below. What are your favorite underappreciated movies? What are your favorite movies that people just don't talk about anymore? Let me know in the comments. If you like this video, go ahead and hit the like button. It helps me more than you know. If you haven't subscribed already, go ahead and subscribe because I will be putting up more content like this every week. And hit that notification bell icon so that you'll be notified when I put up a new video. Thanks, guys. Stay classy.